Welcome to Wildspire. You get to be a fly on the wall for my intimate conversations with entrepreneurs who are changing the world. I'm your host, Stephanie Benedetto, coach, storyteller, and unmarketer at The Awakened Business, helping coaches and change-making entrepreneurs unleash their inspired message and share it with playful unmarketing. I'll ask curious questions and explore uncharted waters with my guest today. Anything can happen when we step into the unknown of infinite creativity, and that's where we're going to play. My guest today is Stephen Lewis, my longtime writing mentor and one of my all-round favorite human beings ever. He has 7 children, 16 grandchildren, I think at last count, who call him Chief, and he's known as El Jefe de la Playa by the group of writing mentees of which I'm a part. This man has been a huge influence on my life. He has a love for paradox, prose, and poetry, and a reverence for drawing out and crafting a writer's voice without cramming it into a box made for someone else. He taught me to get a feel for the creation that is emerging from me and also from other writers so that it can emerge as itself with as little bullshit on it as possible. Stephen Lewis is a former mentor at SUNY Empire State College, current member of the Sarah Lawrence College Writing Institute faculty, and longtime freelancer. His work has been published widely, from the notable to the beyond obscure, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, Christian Science Monitor, LA Times, Plowshares, Narratively, Spirituality and Health, Road Apple Review, and a biblically long list of parenting publications. He's also senior editor, literary ombudsman for the podcast read650.org. His book list includes Zen and the Art of Fatherhood, Fear and Loathing of Boca Raton, a chapbook of poems, If I Die Before You Wake, and 4 recent novels, Take This, Loving Violet, A Hard Rain, and The Lights Around the Shore. A poetry collection, Fire in Paradise, co-authored with Elizabeth Bayou Funk, will be published in 2022. In this conversation, Steve and I talk about knowing eternity, writing to see the truth, and the self-indulgence of creation. I hope you enjoy this reluctantly mystical conversation as much as I did. So Steve, I'm so happy to finally connect with you. You know, I've only been trying for years and you've been just blowing me off because your schedule is so jam-packed and you just can't find any time. I'm teasing. I truly am happy to spend this time with you. And I want to, yeah, it's been years. Just to give some background, I want to talk about Steve Lewis, you. You have, you just made this face. That's so funny. You are one of the people who I can say, you know, can probably count on one hand and certainly two, the people who have had a huge impact on my life. And you absolutely have, from being, what was I, like 20 or 21 years old, walking into SUNY Empire State, and you were my mentor there and telling you that I wanted to explore philosophy and psychology and
philosophy.
It's like, what? Yeah. And seeing you sitting across from me with that look that I'm like, who is this man? What's going on in his head? I can't tell. Do I trust him? Do I like him? And then to you inviting me into the Mill Rock Writers Collective. I mean, I have met 2 of my very best friends through that writing group. I connected with the message that wanted to come through me, that wants to, you know, I started writing. And so you are one of those people who I am so grateful for, has made such a huge difference in my life. So I just wanted to say that. That's over and above why you're here. I love your writing. I love what you're up to in the world. You have always provoked my thinking in very gorgeous ways. So thank you for that.
Am I blushing? I can't tell in this light, but probably, I was like, I'm going to watch Steve squirm now for the next however many seconds. I lavish him with praise. Too bad.
Yeah, it is a little squirmy, but thank you. I'm very touched.
So
And I remember the day you walked into that office.
you do.
Oh,
What do
yeah.
you remember about it?
Well, I mean, it involves a certain amount of background, but sort of skirting through that is that students at Empire State College were most often middle-aged, in transition, moving out of one job, moving up to the next job, moving out of relationships, but they were 40 years old. And then there was this 20-year-old, this gorgeous 20-year-old walked in who wants to study philosophy. And no one wants to study philosophy at Empire State College. They want to, they are retooling themselves.
Mm.
And, it was occasionally along the way, I ran into people who really were interested in something beyond the next job. But anyway, it was exhilarating to meet someone with your enthusiasm, actually.
Oh, thank you. And
yeah.
I did not realize the perspective of that from your perspective, what it was like having me come in there, and I think I was born middle-aged, born and with recurring existential crises every couple years, less, I don't know.
Oh. and that's exciting. People who know what they're doing don't interest me.
I feel the same. It's like when you're in it, when you're in life, there's so much. It just seems like I know less and less. Steve, I want to ask you about, because I didn't have a chance to. Would you tell me a little bit about, I know that you were, and if this is not okay to ask about, by the way, I can always take it out later, but I want to ask about your experience having COVID and how it changed you afterward, because I know that you were very sick. And I saw a change in your writing, as I have seen over the past years, since you retired, just a relentless, ruthless adherence to your own creative muse. I am doing what wants this. I'm a renewed commitment to the purity of what you want to create as a writer and what you want to do with your life. And so I saw something happen again after this experience in what you were sharing, your poetry on Facebook and such. But I'd love to hear from you what that experience meant to you.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And you're right. Something happened when I retired. I think that was 7, 8 years ago. And especially with and it really actually filtered down to my writing, because before then I had written, and happily written, I made a living off my kids' backs, writing for parenting magazines and dad books and things like that. But I was writing for someone else, and I was also doing some of my own work, but a lot of it was driven by people in the mainstream media looking for, stories that were entertaining. And suddenly I didn't have to go to Empire State anymore, which was a lifeline for me for years and years and years. And I didn't want to, and I suddenly did not want to write for anyone else. And it became increasingly important only not to write what I had to say, but only to find out what was going on inside of me. So that really was the beginning, and we can talk about it later, I guess. But anyway, I shortly thereafter, I wrote a novel, and then wrote another one, and then wrote another one, bringing us up to this one. And all of that was, for me, was exhilarating. and your word purity is one that I shy away from about almost everything, because I don't think anything is pure. But the intent was not to I don't know, sort of make impure the exploration that writing a book is all about, and not to do it to please anyone or make millions of dollars, and all of that would have been fine. I like to please people, and if someone paid me $1 million, I'd be thrilled. But the whole point was to write these books. That all came to, it's a year and a half now, when I had COVID. And I was so sick for however long I was sick in the ICU and all that. And I don't want to say that it was a transcendent experience, but I was practically hallucinating. And I was so sick. And when I got out, and I don't want to suggest that I had these visions while I was in the hospital, but visions of who visited me in the hospital came afterwards through the poems. And so I was sort of making it up, but I knew I wasn't making it up. COVID experience is very odd in that way. It's that there's an alternate reality. You tell me if I'm babbling on.
Oh, I love this, Steve. Please keep going.
My primary visitor, because I had no visitors, I just had people in spacesuits showing up every once in a while, to adjust oxygen levels and the cuffs they had around my legs and all sorts of things, and to give me shots in the belly, all of which sort of passed through me like a haze. But I had a student a couple of years ago, a early retired lawyer, who was in one of my groups, like Mill Rock, but it was a later group. And he got ALS, and he got a very bad form of ALS. And so we moved the group to his house. I don't know why I'm telling you this, but toward the end of his life, when he could move nothing but one finger, and was writing that year by retina identification on a screen, a single letter at a time. The alphabet would show up, he'd focus in on a group, and then he'd focus in on the letter. Anyway, he wrote some extraordinary things that year, and then ultimately decided that he was done, and he took himself off his feeding tube and everything else. And he made such an impression upon me about what we do when we're writing, and why it's so important to tell the truth, and what changes for us in the process of telling the truth. So, and that's the backstory, because, like I said, I didn't have a vision of him lying in the ICU. But
damn, I was hoping for it.
And I might have, because I was really close to hallucinating the whole time. And but when I got back when I got home, and in an additional almost month of isolation in a bedroom, I started to write poems, and this guy Neil showed up in the poems, as did an old friend from high school, a woman who, for no good reasons, just she was there. At least I think she was there, and I just you know, it was more through Neil's encouragement, who really, again, was not there, that I started to write about the experience. And the experience was not only transformative in itself, but it was the next push I had on whatever path I was traveling when I wrote the novels, wrote the first 3 novels, which essentially was to find out what was going on inside of me. And that pretty much led to this current book, where I got myself into a character who was approximately my age and much grumpier than me.
Oh, really? At least on the outside.
On the outside, yes. Yes, on the inside, there is a grumpy old man inside of me. But he was, I found out very quickly, he was exploring things that were coming to me about dimensions of life and the silliness of linearity. That we, I think we think that the world is linear because it's comforting. It goes, it's one step after another. We like puzzles. And I think we like puzzles because they're comforting. Now I'm really on the edge of babbling because
Bring it.
Because especially, I think in more modern times, or at least in my lifetime, everyone believes that the psychological model is the model. That you are who you are because of certain events that preceded who you are today. And it's not a bad model. It's just it's so limiting that it and in a funny way, it just isn't helpful to growing as a person, because I am not, that puzzle. What I've come to, and again, sort of cycling back to the ICU and all that, but I'm, there's a spirit inside of me that I don't know, that differentiates me from everyone I know, as there is a spirit in each side. And that's not me. It's somewhere at the core. And there is a psychology about me that I come out of certain experiences. But there is the body of me that just keeps changing. I mean, what a shock to be 75 years old. And and it doesn't do what it used to do, but it has its pleasures, and its pain, or its disappointments. But in any case, that I began to see that not only myself in remarkably multidimensional ways, but that I came to understand that the me who is 4 years old and crying for his mother is not only just a memory, but it's a person who's still existing. And that's where my book really started to take shape. When I was, I didn't know what I was writing when I started the book. And so it's just, I like grumpy old men. I've written a couple of things about grumpy old men. They interest me. And just in terms of parallel time and the people, by the time you get 75 years old, a lot of people have died around me, or around you, or us, whatever. And I began to understand that they were dead only in one limited understanding of time. That they were alive in parallel universes. They were alive within me. That it suddenly seemed, and again, this really came out of the COVID thing, is that it seems silly to think that I'm losing my thing here. That that we live and die, and then that's it. Largely because I can't imagine that you can kill the spirit. I really do get how bodies move on. And again, even that is limited by the dimension I'm looking at through it. It's an awkward sense, but if I'm assuming that little Stevie at 4 years old is still existent on some plane, so are all the people who I knew who have supposedly died, as are everyone who ever lived. So it seems like it's an immutable kind of force. And things like deja vu, which used to be just sort of curious and interesting, I think are sort of flashes into something that we're just understanding, that we can't. It's very hard to integrate them into a life that involves going to the grocery store and picking up grandchildren and things like that. But it seems that it's all there. And the more of it that I experience on that level, the less the sort of inherent anxiety of life is troubling to me. And I certainly have not passed through the anxiety of life, but it doesn't, like I said, it just simply doesn't trouble me anymore. There's something else happening at every moment that I'm living. I'm living the moment more fully because I'm accessing a lot more than I ever did before.
Mm. What do you mean by that? You're accessing more. What are you accessing now?
I'm accessing the moment that I'm alive, and I'm not afraid that it's it's like eating an ice cream, that every bite in a certain way at a certain point in life, you realize that you are closer and closer to finishing the ice cream. So in a funny way, that I'm no longer, I can eat the ice. I'm doing better at eating the ice cream, and not afraid that it's the last ice cream I'm ever going to have, or that there's that sort of crazy notion that I think that a lot of us grew up with. That if there's a good time, then there has to be a bad. There's this notion of karma, which on some level is very appealing, but it doesn't seem to be that, when I'm in this frame of mind, there's no such thing as karma. Mm-hmm. It's just moving through life, that, God is not paying me back for the sins I've committed, nor am I getting rewarded for anything I did. This is just life. And so anyway, the moment becomes less precious and more available. just to experience. I don't know whether that makes any sense, and I'm not even sure that makes sense to me, but I did say it, so I'll stand by it.
Steve, I don't know if you can tell through Zoom, but I'm so moved by what you're saying because I feel the truth of it. I feel the truth of, I've been seeing it more myself in the past couple years of like how much is available in this moment when we're with it. And it's so full and so rich, and it's always been there, this idea that, it's a beautiful gift that we have, this ability to think about past and future and do these puzzles and create this thing and create stories. I mean, it's what allows us to create a story about ourselves or our life, but it takes us away from this moment where everything is happening. And I hear that in what you're saying, I don't know whether it's multiple dimensions or time, but I know very clearly that it's not anything but this. And it's so full, and it's so like it's everything we've been looking for. And I love that you have explored it. I'm going to show it now. I'm showing, in case somebody's listening, like I'm showing Steve's book, The Lights Around the Shore, which I bought and read and really enjoyed. And I love that you're exploring this through your writing. And I had the most vivid experience of that myself last year in November when I did the NaNoWriMo Challenge, National Novel Writing Month, and wrote my 50,000 words.
Oh, you did?
Yes, I did. And I had just like the roughest idea of, I roughed out a couple characters, and I wanted to explore a woman who lives outside of time. And I didn't know how, and I didn't know what that was going to look like, but it turned into this story of time travel and multiple dimensions and multiple different realities existing simultaneously and yet somehow overlapping, and characters going from, it's nuts. And it has like, I've talked to her, I need to tap our mutual friend Tom for the military, like it's got paramilitary type. I'm like, what the hell am I doing writing this? Right. And then it's deeply spiritual. It's got dream sequences. And it was me exploring, what do I see about time? What do I see about identity, who we really are? And like this, from what you're saying, like I can feel it, even though I couldn't probably, like I wouldn't do an analysis of it. All these things that you experience through this transformative experience around having COVID and seeing life differently, that you're exploring this. Even, your protagonist having a coma in the hospital and having visions, right? Like it's not the visions that you had, it's not your life, but there's something there that he's experiencing and having a different experience of time and people in his life who have passed appearing. And, I'm not going to give away anything in it, but like, what's really happening? We don't know. Is this guy crazy, or is he just seeing something? Like he's got a portal into another world that he has access to sometimes. And he's exploring like how it happens. And like, what was it? So I know for me, when I was writing this thing, I don't even know that it's a story and that it's a novel, but it's got like, I tried to map it out having written it. I gave myself full permission to be all over the place. I wrote things out of order. I was like really whimsical. I wrote stuff to me, the writer, I just like did completely self-indulgent. I am in love with self-indulgent creation. And I see you doing that in your writing, and I just love it. I celebrate it. I encourage people to do that in business and in life. But what I saw was like, I did not know, when you said it, like, I didn't know what I was writing when I started. I didn't know even towards the end. I was getting to the end of the month and I'm like, shit, what's happening in this story? I don't know. Like, where is this going? I have to end it sometime, right? Like, does it have to, what's happening? And these connections came together that completely shocked me. And I was like, can this really be happening? Can this be? And I had to check it because characters traveling from other worlds are outside of time. And so like someone ends up being not only someone's mother, but like, even weirder than that. Someone is their own mother. And I'm like, what? What? And to me, it was like such a beautiful way to explore the nature of identity. And I mean, I don't know if it works. I've been kind of scared I've gone back to it. I've read it a couple times. I don't know where to go with it because it's so non-linear and so out of sequence, and it wants to be that way, that it feels beyond me. But I discovered something about myself and the nature of creation in it. And so I'm wondering if for you, like if that something like that happened in this book, like what did you see?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And sort of, let me cycle back just for a moment. That the first book I wrote like this was a book called Take This, and it was before I was and there was an intuitive belief that one could write a book without planning it out. You could live a life without planning it out. And I was on, a place that we share. I was online in Rodanthe, North Carolina, behind someone who said to whoever she was with, take this. And I thought, oh my God, isn't that wonderful? That's what the universe does to us. It says, take this. And there are no instructions after that. And there are no imperatives after that. They're just, this is what you got. And so I started with that notion. And exactly like you, it was, in some ways, it was more linear. But with that first book, it was just, there was I had a guy, and suddenly he was three-dimensional and real, and he was opening a door, and his ex-wife was handing him her rings and saying, take this. And isn't that interesting? I mean, interesting from my perspective, because here I am married 1.5 billion years, and no notion that I'm divorced or ever going to be divorced. And I have a guy who's all by himself, and he's made a mess of his life, and he's going to set out on some adventure. That's all. And every step along the way, as I thought I was jumping, I had come to a dead end, but it really turned out to be a precipice. I jumped off, and something happened that linked into where I'd been and told me where he was going next. And just like you, it all came together. In fact, on that first book, as I'm writing, the guy dies on me, and I'm
Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert!
Yeah, what the fuck am I going to do? I know that I'm not done, and the story just came together with each step along the way. In any case, that was that. And then with this more current book, and that writing of that first book was exhilarating in that sense of jumping off cliff after cliff after cliff. This one, suddenly I have this guy who I'd written a short story about, and our mutual friend Mihai told me it was a novel, and that how
Psychic Mihai.
Yeah, Mihai, pointing that finger and shaking it and saying, "Stephen."
Yes, I remember being pointed at a couple times myself.
Yes, and anyway, I like that notion, and I like the character immediately. And suddenly I'm dealing with things that I'd never thought about, like, babies born with calls, that the sac, and it's supposed to be mystical and all of that. But whatever it is, but like everything, it brought me to a notion of the veils or the separation that I was experiencing to everybody in my life, that I think we all walk around in our own little amniotic sacs, and they're comforting, and they allow us our illusions. But what happens when there's a crack in them, or you bust through them? And that's what suddenly I'm seeing my character Charlie do. And he's seeing possibly imaginary dogs. He's seeing a dead daughter. He's seeing St. Augustine, among others. And it was exactly like that, because I had no idea where he was going. Just that I was suddenly introduced to this notion of being separate from everybody I knew on some level, and them being separate from me. And then with each stage along the way, he runs, these characters he runs into, they're not characters, they're real people. I'm in the car with him driving to the Cape and meeting a little boy. Anyway, and like yours, when I went back to it, there's an old concept called write drunk, edit sober, which I have taken to heart. It's, and you don't really have to get drunk, but you have to write without any intention of controlling what's coming out. It's not automatic writing, because there's something going on, but it is. It's a writing with intention not to get in the way of myself. And the second draft becomes the sober part, and figure out what to do. And actually that was where I started to do more like what you're talking about, is that, and I tried to make it as inconspicuous as possible, but every section of this book is from a different point of view, perspective, first person, past tense, first person, present tense, third person. It just is all over the place, and it all felt right. So I was happy with it. And, it was like circling this grumpy old guy until finally at the end, I finally am in his voice. So
I saw that. I think it was the first time I'd ever read a novel that was written in the second person. I think it was your Hard Rain, and
Rain.
Yeah. And you do this, you do that, and it was uncomfortable. It was like, and the switch to that in this book was also a little like, it's jarring, it was, and I like that it shakes me up. And what I like most about this book, honestly, is that I felt like you really gave yourself permission to just explore. Like, it was just being what it was, and it wasn't linear, and it didn't spoon feed anything. Like, this is what you're supposed to think from this. I love that about it. Someone had said to me in a conversation a few months ago that she's a book coach, but not really. That's not a good name for what she does. She's more like a book doula or a story doula, sort of. Right. Like, she just helps people to give birth to whatever it is that's emerging. And she said, I see people live their book when they write it. It's like, you can't not.
Right.
And it's, when you let it be, it's such a voyage of discovery. And not just about, like, for me anyway, not just about what I think, but something that's beyond what I think. It feels like that. It's like, it's a portal for a channel for a wisdom that is like, I read back some of the stuff I wrote. I was like, I wrote that? Seriously?
Right.
I don't even remember writing it, if I did. But it touches something in me. Like, I feel, like you said, I was happy with it. It felt right. Something about it was how it wanted to be.
Right. No, it's exactly that. And you just articulated it for me, because I don't think I really understood it before this moment. But it's not really what I get to know. It's it's much closer to what is true for all of us. A flash of insight or something that because what does it matter what I know? I mean, it's important to me, but in the larger sense, there really are big concepts, big experiences that filter through all of us, and that's, and maybe because of just talking about the call and veils between us, it makes me feel closer to practically everyone. It's sort of like we're all in the same soup, and I think I lived a lot of my life wanting to separate myself from other human beings. I have my family, and it's almost like a bad metaphor, but I circle the wagons around my family, and that was it. I liked people I liked, and it was fun, meeting 20-year-old girls coming into my office at Empire State. But I came to realize that there were sort of concentric circles around my life, and I wasn't. My intention was to keep all those circles separate from each other, for whatever reason. But in the process of this, especially the last two books, but probably more, it's that those those circles begin to disappear, and it just in a way that all my intent to be special in the universe sort of dissipated, and I just am who I am, and I don't get any special dispensations, but I have access to some. Boy, I'm really losing it. I have access to some notion of eternity that I never had before. I'm beginning to sound like someone I don't like, but that may. But I think that's true.
It means so much to me to hear you say this, Steve, because it resonates with truth. And I also know, having known you for long enough and known, or at least suspected, the inner cynic and skeptic going on, that inner curmudgeon.
Yes.
and the railing at life and the fighting, like, not only for me personally, but to know that you've found that for yourself. How gorgeous. I mean, there are thousands of ways to kneel and kiss the ground, right? Like, there are so many ways to find this sense of eternity that you're talking about, this truth that is beyond our small existence, beyond our bodies and our psyche and the ideas we have about ourselves and this reality. And all these things pass away. It's like loss, passing away, change. Like, I found myself in conversation with a client some months ago, struggling to convey something that I'd found for myself. As we were talking about all this change, everything that's so transient in life, if you put your sense of validation, your safety, your security in any of that, you are lost. It's going to crumble. So where do you put it? And where do you find it? And I knew for myself, I knew it was in me. And I was like, how do I tell somebody like that without sounding all spiritual and shit? Like, how do I, it's not about God or religion necessarily. You can use the word God for it, but it's this, and I think you have said it so beautifully, and without needing for it to be dogmatic or spiritual in some way, that this spirit that is connected with everything and endures beyond all of the personal stuff that passes away.
Right.
And somehow it is deeply reassuring and creates this deep sense of peace in just knowing that. It doesn't change the fact that I die. It doesn't change the fact that people I love are going to go away. It doesn't change the fact that nothing lasts in this world on the outs, in the externals. It doesn't change the fact that I'm going to feel shitty some days. But it makes it all different. Everything is different knowing that. And something that you said reminded me about time. And that's what I've been sort of in and out of. I want to say obsessed, but I'm definitely like in love with the idea of exploring time. And I heard it expressed like this, thinking about, most of us, myself included, think about time on a line. So there's the past, and there's the present in the middle, and then there's the future out ahead. But how I heard it expressed was the past and the future. Time is an experience that moves through the present. In other words, it's a changing, it's another transient experience that moves through now. Like now is not a point on a line. Now is all of it.
Right. They exist simultaneously.
Yes.
That's where it was all. That's, that was sort of the eye opener to me, is that in every second, every moment of life was every moment of life. And the first time I ever saw it was in a writing group, and I see it all the time. I continue to see it, that someone's reading something she or he wrote, and then suddenly they're crying. And they're crying not because they're remembering something, they are actually being that person. That person, that person who got stood up when she was 11, or, and had her feelings hurt, was still there. The harder thing for me to begin to understand, and I'm incredibly curious about it, is that if the past is existing in the present time, which I do believe, then the future is there too. And that, a little bit I played with in this book, or it played on me, but it's a remarkable thing to know that not only is there a future in this dimension, but there's a future that likely transcends this dimension, because if all these times are existent simultaneously, then, and I don't even begin to mean this to have anything to do with heaven or hell or those nasty concepts, but that there is something after death, which is life. And the curmudgeon in me, goes all around. You mentioned God and religion, and religion functions, or it seems to function, when I really get into this, as a way to separate people. It's everything about religion is about tearing people from each other. Either you're saved or you're not saved, you're an infidel, you're not an infidel, you're one of the chosen people, you're not chosen. Everything is a separator. And what I think you and I are talking about is the thing that makes us, essentially the same.
I see it a little bit differently, and yet like arriving at a similar place in a different way, that time doesn't exist, but it is a construct of, it is the energy of thought, like thought as energy, not just mental energy.
Mm-hmm.
And that the illusions it creates are so powerful that we can recreate it in the moment. I don't know that it actually is, and I'm not saying that it isn't. I love the idea of simultaneous realities, but the way I experience it is that the power of that imagination that is not just me, it's like the universe's imagination moving through me, is that I have the experience as if it's happening now when it's here. And it moves through. It moves through like weather. And now is the space that it moves through. You know, now is the space that this experience of past and future happens. It has to. So whether, you know, like we're saying, we're kind of pointing to the same phenomenon experientially from like slightly different ways. And I mean, I can't pretend that I understand any of that, but I love the exploration of it because something about it is so live and presencing.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's, you know, I think where we're coming at the same point is that each of us, you and I and everybody else are simply portals of experience. And so whether they're existing in parallel lines, infinite parallel lines or whatever, but I'm actually closer to what you were just describing, is that it's just all filtering through, and that there are endless dimensions of experience rather than understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding is probably an impediment to the experience. So, you know, I don't know why it reminds me, but I know you'll like this, and it may not have any relevance, but I have mirror twin grandsons who are now in college.
Oh my God, they're in college.
Oh,
that blows my mind. I'm sorry. Keep going.
That's right. Yes, they are sophomores in college. Wow. And I got much older ones too, but regardless. But the twins, who are, you know, indeed mirror twins. One part's his hair on the right and the other part's on the hair on the left. One has a fourth toe that goes up on the right foot. The other has a fourth toe that goes down on the left foot. I mean, it's just a fascinating thing. Anyway, one of them, who's up in Vermont, he is going to class, and he's very nervous because he has a public speaking presentation, and he's just nervous. He calls his mother, my daughter, Nancy, and just really to calm himself down, and tells her he just threw up. So they go through that, you know, deal with it, laugh about it, whatever. His twin, who's still living at home, goes to the local community college, wakes up, walks downstairs, goes to Nancy and says, I don't know what happened, but I just vomited and I'm not sick. So the two of them are vomiting at the exact same time. And anyway, it is in the old frame of reference, just mind-blowing that kind of communication is going on.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, we are that interconnected.
Yeah.
And I love that. It dissolves when we dissolve that separation you were talking about dissolves.
Yeah.
We act differently. We see differently.
Right. Yeah. You know, in some ways, in real world ways, and I'm certainly not there yet, but the enemies are not the enemies anymore.
Right.
The threats out there aren't nearly what I once perceived them to be. So.
Oh my God. I love that we're having this conversation, Steve. I couldn't be more in love with it, really. Thank you. And where is the spirit moving you these days? What's happening? Are you writing something new? I have to know.
Well, I've been writing poetry a lot, and that's been actually, I don't want to say it's been fun, but it's been rich. And I decided along the way that I was done with literary magazines, and I just don't have the patience for it anymore. And I'm sort of aging out anyway. My concerns, a lot of these editors are in their 20s and 30s, and I'm thinking about things that they're not particularly interested in, or writing in a way that they're interested in something. So I've just been putting them up, like you've seen on Facebook. And for no good reason, I decided that I wanted to write covers of albums. And I'm going to do 3 of them. And 3 is just that number that I'm interested in. But so I just finished my Grateful Dead cover of their album, American Beauty. And all I do, they're really not interpretations of the song. I take the song, I find a line that I like, and I write a poem. So the next one is Tom Petty's first album. And then I don't know, there'll be another one. In the meantime, I'm writing 2 novellas that I thought were companion pieces, but now I think there's a third, and I have to see what that is. And anyway, I have no intentions. I'm just writing, hoping someone will publish the books, and that's it.
I'm so happy to hear that. I mean, I'm not surprised at all to hear that you are exploring these different avenues without agenda or real expectation. It's such a journey of discovery. It's such an adventure to see what emerges when you just, put your fingers on the keys or open your mouth, as the case may be. What comes out is like, what?
Really? And, I mean, I can't not understand or not admit to you, and it's something to be 75 and I have a pension and I get Social Security, and so I'm not driven 8, 10, 12 hours a day to make a living like I once was. So I'm in this funny sort of state of grace for however long it lasts. Afforded the time to do it.
And I feel it too, Steve. I have found it somehow. Not an accident. I think it's available for anyone.
Yeah.
And we don't know it when we're caught up in and I'm not saying it's really understandable to be caught up in the rat race or feel the pressures of, in your case, having to support a family of 7 children. My gosh, right? But it's always been available in the midst of that. And it's lovely to know that we can find it at any time of life.
Right.
And yeah, that's
it
cool.
Is there. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. So if someone would like to get your books or connect with you and find out what you're up to, where's the best place for them to do that?
Probably the best place is my website. So I'm gonna start a newsletter, which I will put up on Facebook as soon as I figure out.
And you're going to let me know about it. Am I already on it? I get your emails. You're going to put me on it?
Well, everybody who's on my email gets to go.
Yes.
But anyway, my website, StephenLewisWriter.com.
Cool. And I will link to it as well in the description and the blog post so that people can find it. Oh, thank you, Steve.
Thanks so much for joining me for today's Wildspire conversation. If you'd like to receive a weekly Wildspire email from me filled with inspiring stories, unmarketing experiments, tips for playing your way to impact and income without the hustle and hype, insights from my spiritual business journey, and more, go to theawakenedbusiness.com/Wildspire. Until next time, may you know yourself as the gorgeous wild creation you are.